Hi, everyone. Welcome to White Wine. I'm Bianca and my co host Linda
Hello.
and Dihn.
I will forever be uncomfortable. I'm so sorry. It's not going to
Okay.
get any better.
Now, for a lot of us, talking about race can feel uncomfortable, especially when we start to look at how we fit into the bigger picture of racial dynamics as white people in society. And now, in 2018, Robin DiAngelo introduced the concept of what is called white fragility. And that obviously sparked tons of discussion, tons of fragility around it. It also raised some challenging questions. And why is it so hard to talk about race? You know, when race has the impact on something, why is it so damn difficult for us to have a discussion about it? Why do some people feel so defensive when the topic comes up? And even more importantly, I think, is how can we learn and grow from these conversations? So, what we're going to do tonight is just discuss a few things where we have experienced certain things, where we have raised the topic of race and possibly rightfully so, or maybe not as gently as what we should, according to what I've heard lately, called out some rather destructive and defensive behavior. And I want to open this conversation with one thing. I personally have got a problem with a reference to fragility. Okay. Not because I mind that someone calls me fragile, but when you think of fragile things, they are like small, soft, breakable, things like that. And I don't know, when I see people act with their defensiveness, I just think we must come up with another term, you know, fragility, because there's nothing fragile about the violent reactions I've seen from us white people to discussions on race. I mean, I think it must be called racial defensiveness or white defensiveness, or
But for
I don't know.
me,
Yeah?
for me, when I think about fragility or someone being fragile, I don't think I think of it as the same way as you do. For me, it's when they are easy to cry, or when you call someone a racist and they immediately jump on the victim mentality and poor me. That's what I call fragility.
But
I
they
think.
do that as a defense mechanism against having the real conversation, which is the danger. Their weakness, so to speak, is like a camouflage. So it's
No,
not really a weakness. They're just hiding so that they don't have to do the work.
No, I know. I just like to call the ones fragile that start crying.
Yeah, but I mean, the word fragile, the meaning of it is delicate and vulnerable. Do you really see any of this behavior as delicate and vulnerable? That's what fragile
No,
means.
and I just I think of the word differently. But you're right. It is what it means.
Mhm.
That's what fragile means. Um, I'm just thinking of every time that there's someone losing their mind in my comments, everyone's quick to say that person is fragile. And I think I've just associated that word with someone throwing a tantrum because they're not getting their way, or they don't like what we have to say. I think of them as fragile little, toddlers.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But
Emotionally
that is
fragile.
again infantilizing them, which gives them a
True.
level of protection.
Probably.
I
So
I
listen to
know,
this
that's
one.
true.
Listen to this one. It's an oversimplification of complex reactions. Human responses to racism are complex, with reactions often rooted in personal histories, education, and self-identity. Assuming all defensive reactions are rooted in fragility risks overlooking these complexities, which could lead to misunderstandings. This can reinforce stereotypes and oversimplify people's genuine discomfort with grappling the challenging concepts and lead to a shutdown in conversation.
Which it does. Which it does. So
always, actually,
yeah.
it kind of, they end up just spiraling and being like, I have nothing to apologize for. I'm not my ancestors.
And I just, as I say, it's a lot of defensiveness, and it gets exhausting dealing with it.
It gets exhausting to continue to have to explain. It's like, you do not need to be defensive. No one is asking you to apologize. We are having this conversation so that we can stop the cycle. That's it. So that we're aware of our actions and how they affect others, so that we can step more lightly without stepping on each other's toes.
Yeah, no, I agree.
I also think they are different because people react differently to what we say on social media. Like Bianca's recent video on the Ballable, there are many different types of reactions. Some of which are calling her names, some of which are like, but we are just trying to protect our language, you know, literal cries. And then some are extremely, extremely violent.
Yeah,
and
just expressing anger,
those,
like, shut up, Bianca.
And all of those has, we don't want to use the word fragility anymore, but I think all of those is some sort of subdivision of that fragility we're talking about. Because I think the book what's the book called? White Tears, Brown Scars?
Yes, that's correct.
Also has touches on this, on how we use fragility or becoming the victim to harm others. So fragility in itself is then violence, but there's so many categories to it. Like that one guy who was making terrible threats towards you, Bianca. Why did that person do that? In my opinion, it will be because he is emotionally a child. Emotionally, I know we don't want to infantilize them, but emotionally stunted.
You know what? I'm going to quote the Jedi here. I'm going to quote Yoda, actually.
Okay.
Fear leads to hate. Hate leads to anger. Anger leads to suffering.
Okay, but my view is very different from fear. Okay, what I think is the inability to handle discomfort. And that is it. And there's an arrogance linked to that. And that's why I say is, let's stop infantilizing. Let's stop making it fragile. Listen, I'm so freaking comfortable being a racist idiot or controlling the space or pushing my own agenda that no one should dare to say anything. So what triggers the anger is when a white person actually says, hey, no, that's not how it is. Then
because you're not supposed
it's
to.
It's an arrogance linked to this is my space, and I'm so used to getting my own way. So you will not, and I will threaten your life.
Their space extends to everywhere.
And for me, there is nothing fragile about that. Yes, there is a lot of immaturity linked to it. That I can
self-absorption.
But then again, you must be so comfortable that you can walk around life that way, being immature.
In my mind, I cannot understand how you can turn a situation around and become this crying blobber, bitching about life in general.
Especially after you've just dedicated so much hatred. And now suddenly
I Bianca joked about this, about us making grown men cry, but it's very easy.
It
Eh?
is very easy. Oh my God.
It's what?
It's very
easy.
easy.
It's not like a
No,
hard job.
but I mean, yeah, so they've got two ways of doing this, what I have noticed, and I think that is okay, so actually it's three ways. First of all, I get you're such a clever person, but when you do these things and you're such a, or even worse, you're so pretty, you should be doing better. I'm just like, that is just like what you would tell a 3-year-old. Okay. And then, okay, so that's the way, that patronizing thing. Then there is your behavior is embarrassing. Okay. It's embarrassing to us as white people. And I'm thinking, who do you think you represent? I often want to know when these people say, ons voel so, we feel this way, who is we? I mean, I want to understand what is exactly the group they are referring to. Because
That's why I keep asking them, where's the hive mind?
exactly.
Where is it?
Exactly. And then the final one is, yeah, well, you saw that last threat about they're going to come get me and there'll only be my feet left. My feet nogal. Why leave anything?
Some people are crying, and maybe they don't know what their crying does. Or I don't think it's always purposeful. I don't want to give them a free pass. Because once I learn what white tears can do, I keep it offline.
Did the same thing through my first ever job that I found on my own. I white woman my first waitressing job because I was so easy to rattle, and it made me cry, and I felt genuinely victimized by this until the owners of the restaurant, they were colored women, they sat me down, and I gained a whole bunch of perspective that took me a lot longer to learn after that than I care to admit. It's when you weaponize that to win the argument, not when you're expressing your feelings. When you weaponize your tears to win the argument over what that person is saying, because they might be saying something completely genuinely reasonable, or they might be saying something unreasonable. Either way, your tears don't help.
The reason I say we must be careful with the white fragility thing, and I don't think it's fragile at all. It's not delicate, it's not vulnerable, it's self-entitled. And yes, I understand what you're saying is that there can be an ignorance in the fact that we don't know the impact of our tears, or we don't know the impact of our little tantrum. When we get into a heated debate around, for instance, someone uses hate speech like the K word, and there is, for instance, a black person in my comment section that says, white people really need to start bringing up their children better. Then immediately Sunny will come in there and say, not all white people. And you're like, thinking when it came to this whole outburst around the Bella Bill, which is now the Bella Act, okay, is that it wasn't that reaction that we saw, that march that we saw. I think why I had such a visceral reaction against it, because it wasn't based on white fragility. It was actually based on what is called white rage. And white rage is calculated. It is planned, and it's structured action. Okay. So it's like,
I see it as sly.
So it's policies, laws, and other forms of like resistance. And what it does is it reinforces racial inequities.
The best way I've seen it explained is in this piece by Rachel Ricketts, White Women Ain't Fragile, Nor is White Supremacy. Here is some of what she has said.
Since the Great White Awakening of 2020, there is a growing movement of white folks, especially cis white women, attempting to distance themselves from white supremacy by presenting themselves and their knowledge as the solution to systemic oppression that they both perpetuate and benefit from. At the forefront of this movement is author and anti-racist educator Robin DiAngelo, who coined the term white fragility, which is also the title of her best-selling book. This book and that term are prime examples of why white folks should not and truly cannot lead the racial justice movement. They are models of white supremacy in action. Here's why. The term white fragility is violent in and of itself because it undermines the real, relenting, and tangible harm that white supremacy inflicts on Black, Indigenous, and other folks of the global majority. It centers whiteness and makes this violent behavior seem passive or delicate and thus coddles white people, especially cis white women, into believing their white supremacist actions are somehow benign when they are anything but. Words and terms matter, and the ways white people whitewash and minimize white supremacist violence, even when they claim to be seeking to dismantle it, is precisely why they are ill-equipped to educate on it. It is impossible for DiAngelo or any white person to extricate themselves from their whiteness or white gaze, and consequently, when they attempt to position themselves as experts on the subject, they cause more harm than help.
Well, thank you for listening to us, and we hope, just like previously, I want to say, please leave your comments, like, share, push the subscribe button, and we honestly want to hear your views on how we can address this issue when it comes to, I would say, productive conversations. We must remember this is not about a blame game or anything. It's about growth and getting better at this. Thank you very much. Over and out from me.
Bye.
Bye.